Poland, 1945. As the death camps are liberated, Allied soldiers discover rooms, eldritch texts, half-finished rituals reeking fathomless pits, and black magic runes painted in blood. Deep within the earth, or perhaps all around it, something stirs, no longer sated. An unknowable part of it twitches, analogous to the flicking open of an eye as vast as time. The cosmic veil is sundered. Mankind is doomed. What do? Beamy escaped with a handful of other prisoners when our cattle car was derailed by an unspeakable monster. We ran through the woods and came upon a partisan camp. Everyone was dead, and none of their bodies were still in one piece. We armed ourselves with Mausers and Mosins and Schmeisers and grenades. The old man, Levin, had fought in the First World War and taught us how to use them. We started walking east, towards the Russians. The moving was slow. We had to hide from the Germans and the Poles by day, and at night we had to fortify ourselves in case the horrors came for us. Moving in the dark forest at night would be suicide. We did not rest on Shabbat. God has not upheld his end of the bargain. We will not uphold ours. One of our number, Kovacs, is beginning to scare me. He does not speak German, Polish, or even Yiddish, only Hebrew. Only Rothblatt and Mendel, who went to Yeshiva, can speak with him. The rest of us can only pantomime a conversation with what little Hebrew we know from Torah when we were children. At first we thought he was Hungarian, but now we don't even think he's human. Rachel Fein says he is a Debuk. Every night we watch him mimicking our movements while we hide our suspicions. We made for a city that was supposed to be held by the Russians. We were 10 miles away, and we saw a horrible, sickly glow on the horizon. We felt the heat, smelled the brimstone and corruption. I thought I heard chanting. Kovacs wanted us to continue into the town. The rest of us voted to give it a wide berth. One afternoon, Rothblatt, Mendel, and Kovacs went down to the lake by themselves. We heard shots. Only Rothblatt and Mendel came back. We asked no questions. Later that night, when we huddled around our tiny campfire, we noticed that Kovacs was sitting with us. Nobody saw him return. Little Annelies is quite the marksman. She's the best shot in our group, much to the embarrassment of veteran Levin. We saw a deer. We had canned meat from the partisan camp, but we needed more provisions in order to make them last. Levin handled the Mosin carbine to Annelies. She waited very quietly until she had a perfect shot, then fired. We all saw the bullet hit the deer's heart. The deer didn't fall. It turned its head and looked directly at Annelies. The deer stood up on its hind legs, blood streaming from the hole in its side, and it took a step forward. Annelies worked the bolt on her carbine. I heard Kovacs murmur something under his breath. I didn't understand the words. The deer gently fell forward onto all 4 legs again, then dropped dead on the ground. We didn't go near the carcass. We passed through a village that Mendel was familiar with before the war. Everything was normal. The houses were clean and undamaged. Everything was undamaged. We looked in a few windows and saw plates and silverware on tables. But there were no people. The only exception was the church on the edge of town. It was a blackened ruin, with the roof collapsed inward and all of the glass shattered. The oak double doors had become charcoal, but we could see that there had been a beam placed across it, preventing it from being opened from the inside. There were shell casings by the windows, 9mm. Mendel told us of a ravine a couple of miles outside the town that we could camp in. We could build a larger fire without fear of being seen. We got there, and Mendel was sure that we were in the right spot, but there was no ravine, just a slight depression in the earth that had been filled in. We set up camp in the ditch. It was shallow, but deep enough that we could build a decent fire without it being visible. The ground was soft. We went to sleep. Annalise woke up around midnight. She said she had heard voices, like a crowd of people whispering. Rothblatt and I were on watch and hadn't heard anything, and we told her to go back to sleep. Levin woke up next. He heard it too. Many voices whispering to each other. Rachel Fine heard it too. She said they were crying. I heard it next. Unintelligible at first, but becoming more clear. They were speaking to each other in Polish, with anguish in their voices. We could all hear it now. The voices were speaking at full volume, but muffled. They were all speaking at the same time, and it was difficult to pick out individual voices from the cacophony. We heard some of them say Germans a few times. They were screaming now. The voices were coming from beneath our feet, the sound dampened by the dirt in the filled ravine. There were fewer and fewer words being said, and soon there was no dialogue at all, just shrieks of terror and cries of pain. We doused the fire and left, the screams fading in the distance. When we did a head count in the morning, Kovacs was missing. He reappeared by the fire that night with muddy hands. We were walking through the tall grass when suddenly we all became incredibly tired and weary. We'd been walking a fair ways without a rest, so we all decided to stop right where we were and go right to sleep. Only Annalise dissented. She kept insisting that something was wrong, that we should keep moving, that we hadn't gone far enough to be as tired as we were, and we all ignored her. She was a decade younger than me. I assumed she was just being hyperactive and energetic. I had some doubts about sleeping where we were as well, but my energy was sapped, and it was becoming harder and harder to keep my eyes open. Just a couple of hours of sleep. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my arm, and little brat Annalise was stabbing everyone with a thorn she'd picked off a nearby branch. She pricked everyone multiple times and stabbed herself a few times for good measure, keeping herself awake. She was yawning like the rest of us. We all yelled at her, and Rachel Fine slapped her hard. We needed sleep. We could barely keep our eyes open. Our brains were buzzing with exhaustion, but Annalise wouldn't relent. She kept pulling on old Levin's arm and poking his hand with that damned thorn. Finally, to stop that crazy girl from stabbing us, we agreed to at least move down a ways to a less open area. We drudged and plodded away. As we moved through the tall grass, I found myself more and more awake. Everyone else seemed more alert too. We all realized the unnaturalness of the situation and picked up the pace. Annalise smirked a little bit. We came to the edge of the field and climbed up on a berm. We looked back. A half-mile back, where we almost fell asleep, there was a large, black figure, like a scarecrow, towering high above the grass. We ducked down on the far side of the berm and kept moving. Thank you all for over 1,000 views on the last video. Our first video, in fact. We really weren't expecting that many at all. We were expecting maybe 5 total. But now that we have that kind of feedback, especially a lot of positive feedback, we'll definitely be doing a lot more of this in the future. This is just a stopgap video. But in the near future, we're going to be releasing a possibly multi-part documentary on the life and times of Andy Ditch, the notorious Poop Squatch, as you may know him. And again, really can't thank you enough for watching. You know, we started this as a little fun enterprise, but it turns out other people like it too. See ya!